Hi, everybody. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We were all set to go, and then the Wi-Fi went out. So here we are. Thank you so much for coming to our first virtual cook-along. We're cooking at the kitchens of Jack Francis Catering in Conshohocken, and we are lucky to have Chef Ken Ulsh, who is one of the chefs here, or who is the chef here, to lead us in a spectacular dinner, a stuffed flank steak, melting potatoes, roasted asparagus, a beautiful salad, a crab cake, I forgot about that, and a Napoleon, raspberry Napoleon? Raspberry. Right. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us. Please put your questions, if you have any, in the chat box. And I will ask Ken, and he will answer them for you on the presentation. And let's see. Oh, and please put your Zoom in speaker view so that you will see the chef the whole time. Okay, here we go. Chef Ken, thank you for joining us.
I'm honored and pleasured, and thank you all for inviting me into your home. I'm ecstatic about doing this for you because I love teaching people how to cook. And I've been doing it for 40 years now, and this is what it's all about. So this is a very easy menu. It will go quick. The prep is so easy. You don't have to have a culinary degree to do this. And let me just start. We're going to start with our flank steak. What I like to do is things that take the longest in the oven are the things that go first. The flank steak from start to finish will be in the oven for an hour and a half at 400 degrees in our convection oven. If you have a convention oven, you want to raise it to 425 degrees, okay? I know a lot of you have probably taken your flank steak, which probably weighs around 2.5 pounds in its raw state. I took the liberty of actually taking one and butterflying it. You don't have to do this. It's not necessary. Just taking a mallet, a rolling pin, or a heavy saute pan and pounding it as thin as you can without breaking through is really all you need to do. If you do that, you need to put a piece of plastic on top of the flank steak because it will break through without that cushion of plastic. So let me begin. I have my flank steak already butterflied. And if you do want to butterfly one, basically all you have to do is take your flank steak right in the middle, okay, and just go 3/4 of the way around it, going towards the middle, trying to keep your knife straight up, because if you put it down too far, you will break through that flank. It's no big deal, no worry if you do, because it's going to be protected by the prosciutto, which is going to be the next step in putting this flank steak together for the oven. So let me just open this flank steak, which has been butterflied. I'm going to take, first of all, prosciutto. I'm going to take 8 slices. This is a product you can get from the grocery store. You know, it's pre-sliced, it's paper thin, it's between like a deli paper. Word to the wise, if you're going to separate this stuff, wait about 10 minutes for it at room temperature, because if you don't, it'll split in half because it's so cold. Okay, so we're going to take about 8 slices here and just cover the whole surface of this flank steak. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. And like I said, if you do break through the flank steak, the prosciutto, being that it's the first layer on there, will take care of any holes. This is a little bit small, so I'm only going to use 6 slices of prosciutto as opposed to 8, because this flank was a little bit smaller. So if your flank steak is a little bit bigger, just make sure you cover the whole flank steak with the prosciutto. And then we're going to just take provolone cheese, which I sliced earlier. Not too thick, not too thin. It's going to melt, of course, because it's going to be in the oven for an hour and a half. And then just cover the surface with the prosciutto. And I'm sure and I hope everybody has their herbs all ready to rock and roll. We're going to take, I have basil, I have fresh rosemary, Italian flat leaf parsley, salt and pepper, and a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. So I'm making kind of a paste out of that. Actually, it is a paste. And then I'm going to spread it on top pretty evenly on my flank steak. You can just dollop it across the cheese and then just take your palm of your hand and just smear it evenly. Like, it's all going to, even though if it's not totally covering the cheese, it's going to flavor it up pretty nicely. Now, at this point, you have two options. Butcher's twine is fine. It's not necessary. Most recipes calling for something rolled and tied calls for it. You can use aluminum foil at this point, or you can take toothpicks if you have them. And after you jelly roll it, like I'm going to do here, you can toothpick it. It works just as well.
What herbs are they again?
Rosemary, Italian flat leaf parsley, basil, salt and pepper, and extra virgin olive oil.
Perfect.
Just to create a little bit more flavor.
If you wanted to just put chopped herbs, or how did you made that in the food processor, correct?
Actually, I just used my French knife.
Okay.
Just a rough cut of herbs. You can put it in a food processor. It works just as well. Just pulse it, and that's really all you need to do. So I'm going to take toothpicks now, and where the flank steak is seamed, we're going to just gouge it and seal its doom. And then we're going to take a toothpick on each end to make sure that our filling doesn't come out the sides. And like I said, this is probably the best way to do it, because what you're going to do is, after you've sealed it with these toothpicks, you're going to put it in your 400-degree oven if convection, or 25 if convention, and you're going to roast it for half an hour just to brown it, okay? And while this is going on, what we're going to do, we're putting our sauce together, which is equal amounts of beef broth and crushed tomatoes. Okay, it's 15 ounces of crushed tomatoes and 15 ounces of beef broth, and then we're going to roast it in the oven. Now, it seems like a lot, but what's going to happen is, after an hour and a half, this blend of crushed tomatoes and beef broth is going to reduce quite a lot, very substantially. And after half an hour in the oven temp at 400 degrees, 20 minutes, okay, and it's browned, you're going to continue to roast it at the same temperature for an hour. But at this point, you're going to take aluminum foil and you're going to put it on top of the flank steak so it doesn't reduce too quickly and doesn't burn the meat, okay? And so just time it for an hour and a half. Like I said, half an hour roast, an hour cooked, covered with foil, let it go, okay? So that's our first item. Our second item is we're going to do the roasted asparagus. Here at Jack Francis, we like to grill a lot of our vegetables. We like to roast a lot of our vegetables. We're not too much into steaming here. We found over the years that you know, it just elicits so much better flavor and a better color and a better texture when you roast things. And we've just gotten such a great reception from our customers. So it's a good thing because there are always fibers on the bottom. You want to take it and snap it at the bottom. And where it snaps is where the fibrous piece ends and begins. So this is what you want to discard. And this way you'll always be ensured your guests will eat the whole thing of asparagus. A lot of times, especially when you go to a restaurant, you get asparagus, they don't prep it correctly and there's a plate full of asparagus in it. So that's good. That's good. And then we're just gonna pick it up a little, make it a little fancy. We're just gonna take these asparagus after I've snapped them all, the guys that I've snapped, and we're just gonna peel the bottom to give them like a bi-color appearance, even though they're getting roasted in the oven. So then just take your asparagus, and when you're peeling your asparagus, take your index finger and make sure your index finger is running up the side of the asparagus, because if you don't support it, they tend to be, especially when they're fresh like this, they'll snap in half. Okay? Go ahead. Question? Correct. Yeah.
The steak goes into the oven at 400 degrees for 30 minutes, and then what did you say about 1 hour?
Oh, after, cover it with foil after an hour. What we're going to do is we're going to give it color. We're going to roast it first, okay? Because if we don't, it's going to look anemic after it comes out. I like roasting things and giving it color first, and then continuing the cooking process till it's finished. It's true of anything. Like, you know, if you make beef stew, a lot of people take the cubes and they flour them and they saute them, and sometimes it's a hot mess. But, you know, if you do them in your oven and you can still flour them that way, just put a little oil on a sheet pan, disposable, whatever you have, and just toss the floured beef cubes in the oil and roast them that way. It's less of a mess. It's a lot more effective. It's a lot quicker. And then just continue on. We do a lot of things. Like when I make pot roast here, I use eye rounds because they tend to slice a lot better after they're finished. But people use chuck roast because of the flavor. But you know what? As far as I'm concerned, eye rounds are just as good as any other piece of meat when it comes to doing a pot roast. And then, you know, just submerge them in your liquid, your cooking liquid, whatever it might be. Your meat or paw vegetables, carrots, onions, celery, beef broth, tomato, your fresh herbs, your, you know, cracked black pepper, garlic, whatever it might be. When I cook something, if you want it to be tender, you need to cook it to 212 degrees. That's if you have a probe thermometer, probe it at 212. If you can keep that temperature for 10 minutes at 212, you're going to have an amazing piece of meat and a fantastic meal. All right, so we've peeled our asparagus. What we're going to do next is we're going to take some garlic. I have some whole garlic cloves fresh here, but I took them already, the liberty, just because of time, and chopped them up. So we're just going to put a little bit of fresh garlic on top of these asparagus, a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, and a little bit of lemon zest here. This is the lemon zest of half a lemon. It's about 1 tablespoon. And then we're going to put it in the oven for approximately 20 minutes. I'll set my timer for that. Okay, our next is our starch. We're going to be doing melting potatoes. Melting potatoes are, it's a southern thing. People down south, they take these potatoes, and I'll show you real quickly. You can use any potato for this. A large beefless potato you can use in Idaho. You can use Yukon Golds. These are yellow butter potatoes, and I have them in water so they don't discolor. Drain those out, and when you do these potatoes, you want to cut them about ½ an inch and thick slices. The reason they call them melting potatoes is because after the cooking process is over, they're so tender, they just melt in your mouth. They're really a fantastic thing. It's one of our favorite go-to potatoes here at Jack Francis. Okay, so we're going to take these potatoes. I'm just going to put a little bit of fresh thyme on this. You can use any herb. You can use rosemary. Whatever your go-to herb is, it's fine. Okay, and just toss them in that. You're going to toss them with a pinch of garlic. You're going to toss them with about 4 ounces of chicken stock right here. And then we're going to use some clarified butter, which I have up on my top of my stove, keeping it warm. Our kitchen's a little bit cold right now. So just about 2 tablespoons of butter for about 8 to 9 1/2 ounce slices of potatoes. And then what you're going to do is you put them in the oven, just in a single layer, like so.
Jack.
Ken.
Yes.
Could you please repeat what went into the potatoes?
The potatoes are getting fresh thyme. They're getting butter, just melted butter, and not clarified. I don't add any salt to this because the butter that we're using is salted. We don't want to make them too salty. Chicken broth. You can use canned broth. You can use like a Parmalat box broth, fresh, whatever you have handy. And then we're putting garlic in them. And we just toss them in there and then just pour on the garlic, chicken stock, fresh thyme, and butter. And then we're going to take a dash of cracked black pepper, just sprinkle it on top. We're going to put it in the oven for approximately 12.5 minutes. After 12.5 minutes, open your oven and flip them over and cook them for another 12.5 minutes. And they'll be golden brown, and they're fantastic.
And Ken, everything's at the same temperature?
Everything at the same time.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Our next dish is going to be our crab cakes.
We got one question. How thick do you slice the potatoes?
½ an inch thick on the potatoes. Our next is going to be our crab cake. We have 16 ounces of crab meat here. You can use any kind of crab meat. I don't like special. There's different grades. I don't like special. I don't like back fin because of the shell factor. If you're going to make crab cakes, either use lump, or if you're making this for somebody you really love, use back or a whole jumbo lump. But jumbo lump is really pricey, and a lot of times after you're done picking it, you know, sometimes it's not worth it, because if you're really picking through it for the shell, you're turning it into lump anyway. All right, so we have 1 pound of crab meat here, and we're going to use about a tablespoon of dry mustard. Okay, you can use at this point fresh chives, dry chives. I'm using dry ones. I find they're just as good because they hydrate once you put everything together with your mayonnaise, and which is our next step.
Dry mustard.
The dry mustard is about like a tablespoon for 16 ounces of crab meat. And the chives are about a quarter cup, a guesstimate. Most of the things I do, I don't follow an exact recipe, but they always work out the same because I do it by eye, because I've been doing it for so long. But I can understand how somebody does want a recipe. So we have mayonnaise. I'm using Hellmann's here. This is 5 ounces of mayonnaise. You can use any mayonnaise, you know. You can use Duke's, Hellmann's, a store brand, doesn't really matter. I prefer Hellmann's. We use Hellmann's for everything here. Okay, and then we're going to put put in our breadcrumbs. I'm only going to use half of these. This is
Can you repeat amounts, please?
absolutely. So we have the chives, which is like a 1/4 cup. We have a tablespoon of dry mustard. We have the breadcrumbs, which I'm only going to use basically 1 cup of these. This is 2 cups in here. And then we're going to use about 4 to 5 ounces of mayonnaise, just enough to bind it. You don't want to make it too mayonnaisey, because you want the crab flavor to come out. It's a very simple recipe, but you know what? Like I said, you want the crab flavor of the crab to come out. One thing, I'm not a fan of Old Bay seasoning really for much of anything, except for like if I'm going to be making shrimp cocktail, poaching shrimp. But to me, it's just too harsh of a seasoning. It really takes away from seafood. Okay, so this is our crab cake, very basic. And what we're going to do, I'm going to make 3-ounce crab cakes here. You can make them as big as you want. And then we're going to take, I have a pan here, Teflon. I prefer to pan sear. I don't really like to bake them.
Or regular crumbs?
I'm using pancos here. Pancos, unbeknownst to most people, they're not gluten-free. People think they're made from rice. The original pancos, and I think you can get them, but most panko breadcrumbs are made from wheat flour, so they aren't gluten-free. Okay, so we got our 3-ounce crab cakes here. I'm just going to make 1 just for time's sake. So we have in here, I have butter starting to heat up, and in a Teflon pan. And once it starts bubbling on the bottom, you're ready to rock and roll with your crab cake. We're just going to pan sear it. About 2 minutes on each side, just to brown it. And then we're going to warm it in the oven. And that doesn't take very long. Probably about 5 to 7 minutes, and your crab cake's ready to go.
All right, Ken, we're back. Sorry
Are
about
we
that.
back?
Yes.
We're back. Okay. Well, back at the ranch. We have the asparagus in the oven, which is roasting very nicely. I just looked at it. We have our potatoes, which have about 5 minutes left before we turn them over to finish them for the other 12.5 minutes. And I just finished browning our wonderful crab cake, which will return to the oven. Now, at this point, the way I do things is you can prep everything and take it out of the oven. You don't need to serve it immediately and drive yourself crazy saying, okay, well, I have to time this, I have to time this. You know what? Just make everything and you can heat it up later at your convenience. You don't have to serve it right away, okay? So, while that's working, I'm going to make the sauce for the crab cake. We're doing a roasted red pepper aioli. You can, if you're feeling ambitious, take regular fresh belled red peppers and roast them in the oven until the skins char. Put them in a paper bag, shake them up, take the skins off, chop them up finely, and voila, that's your base. But for time's sake, I have store-bought roasted red peppers, which pretty much are just as good. Because a lot of these canned food products today are a match for things that you're making from scratch. So I have about 3 ounces of roasted red peppers here, which I've chopped up fairly fine. And I'm just going to put them in a mixing bowl, like so. And I'm going to add a pinch of lemon juice to this. It's about a tablespoon. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a tablespoon and a half. We'll do a pinch of garlic. Okay. And I'm going to whisk in some olive oil, about 2 to 3 tablespoons. Okay. Now, at this point, what I do, the reason I whisk the olive oil in at this point, normally, if you're making an aioli, classically you make it with raw egg yolks. I don't like messing with raw egg yolks. You run into problems with food poisoning. So I just want to give this aioli the flavor of a real aioli. So I'm going to just add some mayonnaise into this, because basically an aioli is mayonnaise. So we're going to do about a quarter cup of mayonnaise to this, okay? And that will finish off our aioli.
So it's about a third of a cup, Ken?
About a third of a cup, yeah. And then a little cracked black. I'm not going to add any salt to this. I mean, there's salt in mayonnaise, there's salt in the roasted red peppers. We'll keep it mild. So that's our aioli. We're just going to put that aside while everything else is cooking. Okay. All right, our next step. Look at our flank. The flank's almost ready to be wrapped in foil for the last hour of its voyage. Our next thing is going to be our spring mix salad, which we are incorporating sliced pears into, and poached steamed beets. And for Valentine's Day, cut them in the shape of a heart. And we have crumbled blue cheese, and that's going to be finished with a white balsamic vinaigrette. I like using white balsamic in vinaigrettes and lighter things because, first of all, aesthetically, it looks a lot better than the dark balsamics. Dark balsamic's good for things like you're finishing a product, you're drizzling like a salad with mozzarella cheese and basil and sliced tomatoes, things like that. I mean, it's got its place in society. All right, so we're going to make our vinaigrette first. I'm going to add our white balsamic vinegar first. Okay. And then I have some honey here. It's about a quarter cup of honey and a quarter cup of white balsamic vinegar. Okay. And then we're going to add Dijon mustard to that. I'm going to add about two good tablespoons. Well, that's our potato corns. We got to flip them over for another 12.5 minutes. And our asparagus is done also. Nice and roasted. It's crispy, zest. You a nice crispy garlic on top without being burnt. So we're going to flip our potatoes over. So we'll close our oven. Another 12.5 minutes. Okay, and at 12.5 minutes, I'm going to take the flank steak out, and we're going to wrap it in foil, and it'll be ready for its last hour of time. Okay. So for our vinaigrette, we have our white balsamic vinaigrette. Is Dijon mayonnaise, a little bit of honey to cut the acidity of the balsamic vinegar, Dijon mustard, which is a great emulsifier. And emulsifier, by the way, is something that just is able to take things like oil and just bind them so that they don't separate. And that's exactly what we do. Absolutely. We have, go ahead. Good? You have it? Oh. All right, the balsamic, I'm just using a few tablespoons of that. I'm using 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard. I'm using close to a quarter cup of honey to sweeten it up. And then we're going to use about a half cup of extra virgin olive oil to bring it all together. I mean, you can do this in a food processor, or you know, you can do it by hand. It really doesn't matter. If you use a food processor, it's a lot quicker. I mean, you can even make hollandaise in a food processor. All you got to do is take the raw egg, the lemon juice, and just turn your food processor on high, and then just take hot clarified butter and slowly drizzle it in there, and you have hollandaise, and it's perfectly emulsified. So this dressing's, you know, enough for a week. It's when you're making salad dressing, it's hard to make, you know, enough for like just 2 salads. So, and that's it. And we'll just add a little bit of pepper to it, whatever your preference is. Some people like more pepper than others. And I'm just going to add that back into our olive oil container. So that's our salad dressing. Hold that aside. And now we are going to make our raspberry Napoleon. And then we'll just pull everything together and plate it up. Now I've already made, for the raspberry Napoleon, it's getting 3 layers of puff pastry. You can buy this puff pastry in any frozen section of any grocery store. We're using Pepperidge Farm. Right here. There's enough. There's basically 2 sheets in every box of this, and this will yield you about 6 Napoleons per box. I cut some up already. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to get to this point here. Take pan spray, or you can take butter and just take melted butter, pan spray, just spread it on a sheet pan like so, and then take, I did 2-inch by 2-inch puff pastry squares. I used a little cutter for this that I have. It's 2 by 2-inch. You can make them bigger. You can make rounds. You don't need to use a cutter. You can use a knife. Most of these puff pastries are already kind of, they're all ready to go. You can actually cut them just going down using your eye into perfect squares. So we're going to take that, put on a sheet pan, and again, this is going to go at 400 degrees. So, and take a fork, and you're going to take the tines of the fork and just go through the puff pastry, because we want this to be thin and crispy. We don't want it to rise. It's more like a wafer than anything else. And then take another sheet pan. I know we all have sheet pans in our house. And press it on top. And that will go, this will go into the oven for about 10 minutes. And the end result will be right here. So basically in 10 minutes, our potatoes will be done. Our flank steak will be ready to be wrapped and covered in foil. And our little feuilletés for our raspberry Napoleon will be ready to put together. So since these are already together or done, I'm going to finish this Napoleon. We're going to take 8 ounces of cream cheese here, like so. And this has been softened. I'm going to take the lemon zest of half of a lemon, and then I'm going to take 1 1/2 to 3/4 cup of powdered sugar, and we're going to whip that up. And then we're going to take 4 ounces of heavy cream, add that to it, like so. And then we're going to just basically whip it soft. taken my cream cheese, lemon zest, confectioner's sugar, and whipped it soft, okay? And then I'm going to take a spreader, and we're going to spread that on the layers of cream cheese, or pastry. And I'm going to actually assemble it on a plate, and then I'll take it and transfer it to our finished plate. So what I'm going to do is take the first layer, take the cream cheese mix. You can make this with a lot of different things. You can use something called pastry cream, which is nothing more than confectioner's sugar and egg yolk, which you and cornstarch. That's our potatoes, and our crab cake is going to go in a minute. Our potatoes are done.
Yeah.
Our crab cakes are done. I just need to heat it up, and we're going to wrap our flank steak at this point with some foil and let it go for 1 hour at 400 degrees in our convection oven. 425 at our convention. So that's I'll try that crab cake for about 5-7 minutes. That's all you really need to do. Okay, so we're doing our Napoleons. Like I said, it's just one layer sandwiched raspberries with our cream cheese mix. Make it pretty even. And then what I'll do is I'm going to put cream cheese here so it adheres to the top. And then we'll do a little more cream cheese up here. Lemon, confectioner's sugar. If you don't want to use lemon zest, you can use orange zest. You know, if you want to kick up the cream cheese, you can add a little vanilla to it. It's a very basic recipe, but you know, I've realized after years of cooking that, you know, sometimes you don't have to get too complex with things to make something good. Sometimes simple is better. So we're just layering our like so. And then we'll take our confectioner's sugar. Now you can use a shaker for this. You can use a small sieve. Just for convenience sake, I'm just going to use the container itself. A little bit of cream cheese. Like so. A little garnish on top of a raspberry. Like so. And then I made, and this is not part of the recipe, but you can do it. Just take about a cup of raspberry jam. Seedless is best. You don't want to have to strain out the seeds. And about a tablespoon of water. You can microwave it for about 1 minute, and voila, you got a raspberry sauce. So I'm just going to plate this up now because everything else is working. And then we'll just put everything together as it comes around. So just a little bit of raspberry sauce there. We'll plate up our Napoleon. And so we get a spatula here. Wow. So now it's going to be plate up time. Here's our raspberry Napoleon. Like I said, you can That's a very simple recipe. If you make pastry cream, you're going to have to use egg yolks. You're going to have to use confectioner's sugar, cornstarch. You cook it slowly, add tepid milk to it, and then thicken it slowly. It's a little more complex. I'm just doing this because it's a lot easier. Okay, so that's our Napoleon. Why don't we start plating up everything else? Now I have already done the flank steak beforehand, which is done because we don't have an hour to wait for the other one. So this was done a little bit earlier. It's ready to go. You just take your sauce and you can heat it up separately. Now, when you do this flank steak, after you take it out of the oven after an hour, you want to give it somewhat of a power nap. Let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes before you slice it, because you don't want it to fall apart. And that is our puff pastry. This is what it'll look like after 10 minutes. Voila. Good to go. We already did that. Then let it cool before you do build your Napoleon. Okay? So, while your flank steak is resting, you can get your crab cake together. When you put your crab cake and plating it up, just be careful with it because they are delicate. There's not a lot of filler in it. And the more filler you put in, I mean, it's a lot more durable. But in this situation, it's very, very light and it's very delicate. Put our aioli on there. You can put on as much as you want. Garnish it with some fresh chive, like so. Okay. And of course, our flank steak is ready to go. Heat up my sauce. We're going to put him at the opposite end of our plate. Like I said, this is enough for about 6 people. If you're using the toothpicks, of course, after it comes out, you take the toothpicks out because you don't want to be giving somebody a piece of a toothpick on a flank steak. Okay. A bit of Italian flat leaf parsley for that. Okay. And then we'll just plate up our potatoes and our vegetable, and we'll be good to go. And our salad. So a pound of potatoes, uncooked, is probably enough for 4 people. And these are really tender, real buttery. The flavor of the chicken stock really makes them savory, and thyme just cannot be beat as an herb for potatoes. It's the best, in my opinion. Okay. So here's our potatoes. Again, we have our roasted asparagus. Like so. Lemon, garlic, lemon zest, garlic, olive oil, and a little bit of pepper. So there's our finished entree. So, this down a little bit. Okay. Here's your Napoleon. Let's finish our salad off. Toss our salad in our vinaigrette. Just a little dash. We don't want to drown it. Now, what I like to do when I'm making salads is I like to, if it has, in this case, pears and beets, I like to give it its own dressing after I toss my salad, spring mix, baby arugula, spinach, whatever it might be in the dressing. Then I'll take the residual dressing and do, in this case, the beets and some pears, and just artfully arrange them around or on top of the salad. So, like I said, in this recipe, we're using blue cheese, but you can use any cheese you like. You know, blue cheese is good because it's sharp. Goat cheese is sharp. Feta is sharp. Those cheeses are sharp. And our heart-shaped beets are right here. Okay. Give a little sprinkle of blue cheese around. Right down the plate.
Yep.
We are now on. Okay. So in review, these are the dishes. We started with our flank steak because, like I said, the flank will take an hour and a half. So you want to do the longest prep the first. And we took our flank. In this case, I butterflied it, but like I said, you can pound it thin and put plastic on top and mallet it, or, you know, whatever you want to use that's heavy, that'll flatten it. A saute pan, a rolling pin. And then I took it, and in this case, I did 6 to 7 thin slices of prosciutto, layered it across the flank. Then I took 6 to 7 thin slices of provolone, and I layered that on top. And then I took my paste of fresh herbs, olive oil, extra virgin, and salt and pepper, and just smeared it across, and then rolled it up tightly, toothpicked it, put it in the oven at 400 degrees to sear it so it has some color. And after half an hour, I just covered it with foil, and I made a sauce of half amount of beef broth and half amount of crushed tomato, poured on top before I put it in the oven to sear it. And you know, if you want more sauce, you know, you can use twice the amount, but it's an even ratio of beef broth to crushed tomatoes. And then just let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. Like I said, let it take a little bit of a nap, and then slice it. And you got some nice little pinwheels there. It's a nice little wow factor entree. Doesn't really require a lot of work, but it sure as heck looks nice. And guess what? It tastes just as good. And then we just took asparagus and we snapped them at the end where there are fibers, throughout the fibers part. Peeled the ends and took olive oil, lemon zest, garlic, and cracked black pepper, and tossed them in that and layered them and roasted them in the oven for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 400 degrees. Took them out of the oven. Then we made our potatoes, half-inch thick. These, like I said, are yellow butter potatoes. You can use Yukons, you can use Idahos, you can use red bliss potatoes, but they would have to be a lot larger. A lot of red bliss are very small. Like they have A and B, so you would want to use the A bliss, not the B's. And then I just tossed them in butter, chicken stock, cracked black pepper, garlic, fresh thyme, roasted them for 12 and a half minutes, single layer in the oven at 400 degrees. And then after 12 and a half minutes, turned them over so they roasted on the other side. And like I said, it's a big thing down south for melting potatoes, and they melt your mouth. That's why they're called melting potatoes. And we made our crab cake. And I did forget to add one ingredient, the Worcestershire, but it's on the recipe, just so you know. And we used 16 ounces of crab meat. We used our Dijon mustard, like a good several tablespoons. We used about a cup, a little over a cup of breadcrumbs. We used 4 to 5 ounces of mayonnaise, and we used our quarter cup of chives, and gently tossed that, formed our 3-ounce crab cakes, pan-seared them in a Teflon pan on the stove at medium heat and in butter, and then just finished heating them through in the oven for 5 to 7 minutes at 400 degrees. And we made our aioli with that, which was nothing more than just chopped up roasted red peppers. In this case, I said I used canned ones. And then I took a little lemon juice, a little garlic for the aioli part, and mixed that together, and then finished it with some mayonnaise, combined it all together. Because like I said, you can make a real aioli, but using raw egg yolks, it's not always a smart thing to do. We just put it right on top, and then we made our Napoleon, which is 3 layers of thin, crispy puff pastry. Lemon, you could call it a curd, I guess. It's just lemon zest, half of a lemon, 8 ounces of cream cheese, like 3/4 to a cup of confectioner's sugar, and whipped. And you want to definitely soften the cream cheese before you do that, just to give it the head start before you incorporate your lemon zest and your sugar. And then we added a little bit of heavy cream to not lighten it up, but to thin it out a little bit, because otherwise it would be not as spreadable. And then just garnished with fresh raspberries in the 2 layers, confectioners on top, raspberry garnish on top. And I took 1 cup of raspberry seedless jam and 1 tablespoon of butter. I microwaved it for 1 minute and mixed it together, and that's the base for our sauce. You can always take fresh or frozen raspberries and cook them on the stove with sugar, and then strain them through like a chinois, which is like a very fine china cabinet. But it's a lot of work. Then you got to push it through with a spatula just to remove all the seeds. It's a lot easier. And that was my whole intention with this menu. Let's do it easy. Let's make it look nice. Let's make it taste good. And then we did our salad, which was a spring mix with a vinaigrette of white balsamic. And like I said, white balsamic's great for making dressings because aesthetically it looks good. You're not going to have that dark dressing on your salad. And we use Dijon mustard in that, and honey to cut the acid, and we combined it with extra virgin olive oil. That was our dressing. Tossed it, spring mix, and then separately tossed the sliced pears and the heart-shaped beets in the residual dressing, garnished on top, and then some blue cheese crumbles on top. Like I said, you use blue cheese, you goat cheese, you use any cheese you want. Food to me is a very versatile thing. There's nothing written in stone. It's really what you prefer. But as long as you have the basic guidelines down and go with that, that's the most important thing.
Marianne says, this was great. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I enjoyed it immensely. This is what I like to do. If I wasn't working in a catering outfit, this is the best place I've ever worked. I love the people I work with. I love the people I work for. If I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be teaching.
We have one question. How long did you bake the puff pastry?
Oh, I baked the puff pastry for 10 minutes at 400 degrees. That's really all you need to do.
So that was great. Everything was in the oven pretty much at the same time and the same temperature.
Absolutely. And that's the whole idea. You want to try to time everything as close as possible as you can. Like I said, you're not, let's say you're having a dinner party. You're going to have to prep these things ahead of time. It's what they call mise en place. Like when I was in culinary school, we had a student that raised his hand and said, "Hey chef, what shelf can I find the mise en place on?" You know what? He didn't last. Mise en place means everything in place. As if you get your mise en place, your ingredients, everything organized, you can do anything. And it's all about timing and pulling it together. And everything here was 10 minutes, 12 and a half, half an hour, boom. And it all comes together pretty quickly. And it's also about the presentation, Plating up is so important. Like they say, it's so corny, but it's so true. Eye appeal is 9/10 of the meal. It's true.
All right, well, we want to say one final thank you to Jack Francis Catering and Chef Ken Alsh for showing us how to make this beautiful dinner for Valentine's Day for the people we love. What we will do is we'll put a recording out probably tomorrow of this session, as well as the recipes. So if you want to make this whole dinner on Valentine's Day, you've gone through a dry road for your dinner, and you can make the whole thing again on Valentine's Day or any day. So thanks again to Chef Ken, Angelo Melissa, who is our cameraman and all-around tech guru, and Patty Francis from Jack Francis Catering. Signing off now. Have a good night. Enjoy your dinner.